Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Beitzah daf Chaf Gimel. We're going to begin on the bottom of Chaf Beis and Mid Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, with the words Yiboilahu. We were discussing, based on our Mishnah in yesterday's daf, that one of the 3 things in which they were lenient, was Manichin es hamukmer b'yomtiv, that they were able to put these spices of frankincense on a coal on Yom Tov. That was something which was allowed. And on this, the Gemara said that the machlokis was only lahareach, if the purpose was in order to be able to produce a sweet aroma. However, if it's legamar, if it's in order to be able to complete a kli, that is something in which is not allowed. So on this, the boilhu, the Gemara asks, Mahu ashen, what is the din regarding smoking fruits? In other words, to be able to produce a nice taste coming from this smoke, are you allowed to do that into the fruits? So Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Omer Rab Aser Shmuel Omer Mutter. Now, it makes sense why one would maybe say it's mutter, because after all, it's for nefesh. It's for the purpose of eating. However, we say, according to another opinion, it's aser. Says Rashi, the tinofuk yitera who ve'ein shavachol nefesh el istinis. This is not something in which is for all people, but it's only for people that are a little bit picky, that they wanted a particular specific way, and therefore that's not considered to be shavachol nefesh according to this opinion. So this the Gemara continues and says as follows. It says the issue is there's actually a malacha, which is extinguishing, that takes place when you're engaged in the smoking. So Rav Nachman, why don't you say there's an issue also about kindling? It starts off with the extinguishing, and then at the end there is kindling. So it only mentions that which is the beginning, but the truth is they are both happening. Says Rashi, Vayu Havibe. Both of them take place, but he mentions that which is taking place first. Rabbi Yehuda al Gabi Gacheles Aser. He says that if you put them on coals, it's aser, because there's the issue of Mechabel Mavir, that on these coals they may get extinguished, they're going to get kindled up as we continue the Chaf Gimel Bad Aleph. However, al Gabi Cheres Mutter. Why earthenware is it allowed? Says Rashi, the kiboy leika, v'havarinami audishino hi kliach yad, v'leiki sur deraisa. So there's no form of kiboy, of extinguishing, and even if, let's say, there's havara that takes place, it's not in the normal way, but it's kliach yad, and since it's an indirect way, it removes itself from issa deraisa, and therefore we're lenient. So he says there's actually another issue, that there's a concept of moiled, that it enters into this earthenware vessel and it produces this reich, and it's an issa d'Rabbanan because it's something, as Rashi says, a davar chadash karavu l'asei malacha chadash. It's like doing something new. Rabbi Yosef V'Tavayu sachufi kasa shiroi b'yom matava. Also, if a person will on Yom Tov take this cup and to put it by these silks in order for the reach to go into this kos, it's awesome. My time and mishum the kamod reicha, again because it's like starting anew. How come when we talked about in the first parak that a person is allowed to be moila malilois, you could take grain, or in this case, atzi b'samim, the spices of wood, and you can put them between your fingers in order that the reach should be able to come out, to be able to have a much stronger smell. Why is that allowed? Why is this not allowed? Where it says hasam over there, reicha miya'isa. The smell was already there before you did anything. All you're doing is a superhu de kamaisif reicha. You're just adding to it. Never being moisif, by rubbing it makes the smell a little bit more potent and strong. That's allowed. However, by you putting it on the gacheles or on the cheres, that's something which did not have any smell before, and all of a sudden you're producing that smell. Rabbi Omer Gabi Gachelos Nami Mutter. He says the opposite. even on coals itself is mutter. Midahavi a bistereg muri. He says that's just like putting meat on these coals. So this is a tremendous kula, but he says it's okay. Why? As Rashi says, Kishmuel, the oichel nefeshu. It's considered, again, even if it's not maybe shavachol nefesh, but it's oichel nefesh. But he says actually, oisin pes zev v'shavachol nefesh. Yimishum kiboy v'abar baludi recha midi havi bisar gemuri the ikakol hani v'shari. Even though when it comes to doing this with meat, there's all these potential issues, it's still mutter. So too, we're going to say the same thing, it's mutter here. So the machlokas, is this considered specifically for an istanis, or is it for everyone? Alternatively, when we say uchol nefesh, the question is it has to be shabel chol nefesh. What's mutter? Something which is shabel chol nefesh. So there's the whole discussion. For example, let's say they're eating deer. So is deer shabel chol nefesh? Not everyone can get to it. So moreover, elsewhere said no. Technically, it is something that anyone can eat. But if it's something in which is not really accessible, or something that not accessible, it's still shabel chol nefesh, like deer. However, if it's something which not everyone does, then that's where it's questionable. There's actually a discussion about smoking cigarettes, which of course, Bisman is a big shiloh of a person allowed to smoke l'chlal. What we already know is Shmartim Odas Nafsho Seichem, we know the negative effects. But assuming that it's not an issue for that, so there's a question, are you allowed to smoke cigarettes on Yom Tov? So of course people who tragically are addicted to cigarettes, they do anyway, but it's not so pashut whether or not that's considered to be oichel nefesh or something which is shabel chol nefesh. Ayin, the gedoyle achroinim that grapple over this shaila. Okay, Armalei Meimar says my ketura. So he says as follows. Actually, let's go back. Darish Rav Gavia mebiksil pischa de meiresh galusa ketura shari. Ketura is allowed. So what is that? So Armalei Meimar my ketura. Ketura bidim maisa umenhu. If we're talking about that you're doing it with your hands, that's something in which requires expertise, which is a form of, as Rashi explains, ketura lashon kesher, like making a knot, which that should be usher. V'il ashen, if it's referring to smoking, usher. The kamachava, we already said that you can't do this. So Amr Rav Ashi ulm ashen. So how is that mutter? Against like putting the meat on the coals. My ketura, biyadi my suumenhu. The ashen aser the kamoilud recha, because you're creating a new smell. So Rabashi anam risa nihile. I said this over in Mishmei the Gabarabba. Risa was nihile said over by a great person. Oilam ashen. Midahavi biserag muri. So he said that one of the kulas on Pesach, on the first night by the Seder, you're allowed to take this gedi, this kid, this goat, which is makulas, which was, according to one of the opinions, the limbs were put inside the stomach, and when it was being prepared, it had like a sound of toch that came from it because of the sound from as it was being prepared. The problem is, l'chayra, a person may think that this is like you're bringing a carbon pesach, in a time when there's no Beis HaMikdash. That's a problem. So Tanya Rabbi Yosi Metudus Ish Roimi, Hinigas Reb as Beni Roimi, he allowed that this Gedi Makulas should be eaten on Pesach night. So Shachli Amali Tudus Ata, if you weren't the great Tudus, I would excommunicate you. You're causing people to mamish eat kachim outside of the Beis HaMikdash. It has the appearance of kachim, and therefore that's the problem. We don't want anyone to look and say, "Hey, it looks like a carbon pesach that's being eaten." And again, for this, there's some people are noyig not to eat roasted meat on Pesach night because of this notion it's nira, that has the appearance like the carbon pesach. Let's see the next Mishnah. So there's three things that Rabbi Eliezer ben Azari, the famous Rabbi Eliezer ben Azari, who became the Nasi after Rabbi Gamliel, the fourth parak in Brachos, at a very young age, at the age of 18. So he said three things as a heter. And here's one of them. Paraso, regarding his one cow, Nebuch, it sounds like he was a poor guy, Blazim Nazaria, Yatzibur Suah Shabin Karneha. He allowed it to go with a string around its horns. And this is based on a Gemara in Shabbos discussing whether or not this Ritzua is a Masoi. It's considered like a burden. And it's not something which is really part of the animal's what it wears. So therefore, because it's not a takshit, so then it's also to do this. So too, not just an isser for yourself to carry, but also for your animals. It's behem techa. It's also your animals. However, Blezim Nazaria said that this was no, it was for beautification, it was for decorative purposes, and it was allowed. Fine. In addition to that, kardin esa behema b'yamtiv, he allowed you to comb an animal on Yom Tiv with a special type of iron comb, which its teeth were very thin and small. Now, the problem is by doing that, it's seemingly you're making a chabura, a wound on the animal. For some reason, he allows it. We'll see the Gemara on that. And then finally, he allows the grinding of the peppers in their mill. So on this, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ein mikardin es behema b'yamtiv. He says, no, you cannot do this combing of this animal. As we said, you're making a chabura. Aval mikartzifim. But he'll allow you to be doing mikartzifim, which we'll see, Rashi points out, these are a wooden comb, and its combs, the pieces on the comb are not very close to each other. They're wide apart. And because of that, it does not cause a chabura. He doesn't allow any comb, not the big one, not even the wooden comb, which doesn't even make a chabura. We'll have to see what's the problem with that. So remember, going back to this animal, this one par of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, remember Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah chad a par havilei, he only had one? He said that Taleas Aralti Agli Havi Meiser Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Edreha Kol Shait V'Shait. Every single year, the Meiser that came forth from Elazar ben Azariah was in the tens of thousands of a golem, which gives you an idea. He didn't just have one cow; he had many tens of thousands of animals. So how could it say paraso? We didn't just have one. So my answer is, you're right. Of course, it doesn't mean his one cow, because he had many. So Tana lo shelo haisa ela shoshchinato haita. It wasn't his; it was his neighbor's. He had tens of thousands of animals. He had a neighbor who had one par. And the question is, so what do you mean? It's his. It wasn't his, it's his neighbor's. So an unbelievable line. Since Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was right next to this guy, his neighbor, and he never said anything, and his neighbor did this, even though Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah himself didn't do this for his own animals. So therefore, that was proof. Because otherwise he would have made a mechah. He would have told him, by the way, this is not what you're supposed to do on Shabbos, it's a masoi. The fact that he didn't do it, it's allowed, which is an amazing thing. That if you see someone doing something and you don't say anything and you're an adam gadol, it's as though you're being maskim to it. Shtika kodah. You saying nothing when you know that you could make a macha is an indication that there's nothing wrong with what that other person's doing. The second thing of our Mishnah was kardin es behema b'yom, about combing with this fine metal comb. Tanabam. So eza kidav, eza kirtzuf. What are these two things? So we've kind of elaborated already in the Mishnah. But kidor is katana v'yois and chabura. The kidor is referring to a small fine comb which makes blemishes on the animal. It causes cuts. Kirtzuf gedolim, it's much wider and bigger. Ve'enois and chabura. It doesn't cause a chabura on the animal. So v'gimel machlokas b'davar. It's actually a three-way machlokas. Rabbi Yehuda savar. We know that Rabbi Yehuda holds the davar she'en mischavet aser, that it's not allowed, even if it's a malacha you had no intention of doing. You did not intend when you were combing the animal to make a chabur on the animal. You don't want to cause sar b'alechaim. You're doing it because it's actually part of the process of caring for the animal. But it's true that you may make some form of a chabura while using it. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that when it comes to a davar she'ein mischabin, it's aser. Miu karud katanim v'yos l'chabura. When it comes to the small comb, which is metal, it will make a chabura. That's not allowed. Kirtzuf gedolim v'yos l'chabura. V'loy gazrinin kirtzuf atu karud. He doesn't make a gezerah because there's nothing wrong with technically using this wooden one, which has the teeth which are wide, far apart like this, right? So in that situation, no chabura. The question is, are you geyser atu? So he says, no, you're not going to make such a gezerah. Rabbanan sabri nami kreb Yehuda, davar she'ein mischaben asa, v'gazrinin kirtzuf atu karud. He makes the gezerah. So he holds davar she'ein mischaben as asa. You can't use this small, fine tooth comb. You can't use the big one because if you allow you to use that one, you'll end up using the small one too. Okay. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah savar lo Reb Shimon. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds like Reb Shimon. Davar she'ein mischaben mutter. Ubein karud, ubein kartzuf. Shari, it's completely allowed. Omer Rabba, Omer Rav Nachman, Omer Shmuel, Omer Rav Nachman, L'chudei, Halacha Reb Shimon, Halacha of Reb Shimon, that holds the davar she'ein mischaben as mutter. Shahar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah maidaloi, because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah agrees to him, and we're going to paskin like the shita of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And Rashi says the famous Gemara in Shabbos, Gur adam meat of a kiss of a savsel the davar she'ein mischaben mutter. If you drag a bed, a chair, a bench on the ground and it causes a chritz, an indentation, but it wasn't intentional, it's a davar she'ein mischaben, according to Reb Shimon is mutter. And that's what we paskin like. So the question is, even though in the beginning of the Masechta, if you recall, on Yom Tiv, because people are mezalzel, were more, the Tana actually paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, davar she'ein, that it's aser. However, the paskins like Reb Shimon when it comes to the dinim of Shabbos, because Shabbos is more chamer. Okay. Anyway, so I in the Meforshim that discuss that the connection between these two parts of this Masechta. Fine. So Amalei Rabbi Rav Nachman v'leima mar halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Why don't you say the halacha Rabbi Yehuda? Shar chachamim moedim lo. What's it? Oh, you're passing Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. What do you mean? The chachamim. You should hold like Rabbi Yehuda. So Amalei anak Reb Shimon sirlei. We hold like Reb Shimon. But oyit shahar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah moedim lo. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah agrees to this statement. Okay, question 4. Mehem study hamachlokes im mikardin dim mikartzifim behema biyavta, which is question 4, which of course we just did, and it's totally on two things. First of all, do we hold like Rabbi Yehuda that davar she'ein mischaben is aser? Do we hold like Reb Shimon davar she'ein mischaben is mutter? So that's the first piece. And the other question is, even if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, davar she'ein mischaben is aser, the question is, are you geyser? Do you make a gezer kirtzuf atu karud? That's the second piece. Let's continue now with the next Mishnah. Chav Gimel Amud Beis. So Harichayim Shel Pilpolim, which we were just talking about this grinding of peppers, more didn't really elaborate much on that here. It says that when it comes to this millstone, this grinding of peppers, Tameya Mishum Shleisha Kalim, it has 3 separate levels of Tumah. There are like 3 separate parts. Mishum Kli Kibul, the Kli which actually holds the peppers. Mishum Kli Mateches, it's of metal. And Mishum Kli Kavra, of the sifter, the sieve. So Rashi says, Mekabelos Tumah al Shem Shleisha Kalim. Nafkamina, what's the difference? If it's Mekabel Tumah, it's Mekabel Tumah. Who cares if it's 3 times? The Nami Ozul Chad, let's say one of them goes off, Shema Mina Tmeya Mishum Idoch. Fine. So let's say it touches one, it doesn't touch the other, or it's dismantled. Okay. Tanam Tachtaina, the bottom part is Mishum Kli Kibul. That's where the Kli holds the item. MCS, the middle is Mishum Kli Kabra, is the sift or sieve. El Yoda Mishum Kli Mateches, because it's metal, and metal, of course, is Makabel Tumah. Next and final Mishnah in this pair. So Egla Shel Katan, let's say you have this baby carriage. Says Rashi, Shaisin lo lischayk, so people could like joke around and relax. V'yoshev have to sit on it. Matalta noisaleha, and you move it around. Tumei medras. So the din is it has tumas medras, which is on sitting on it. So when is something matama medras? As the Gemara says in Shabbos and numerous other places, if you're sitting on something which you're not supposed to be sitting on, that has other utility, we say the words Amoid, stand up, v'nas malachtenu. Let us do our work. So if you're sitting on something in which really has other utility, then the din is that it's not matam medrus. But because this is something in which is used for sitting on, no, you can't say amoid v'nas malachtenu. And therefore, because of that, it does have the capacity to become tamei medrus. Okay, fine. So that is the first piece. And also the nitalos b'Shabbos, we're going to see it's considered to be a kli, and therefore you could move it on Shabbos. It's not muksa. The enu nigreres, you cannot drag it on Shabbos. El gabi kalim, only if, let's say, it's on top of kalim, let's say on top of some type of a garment, because otherwise you're going to make an indentation, a chritz into the ground, and there's an isser of one who digs a hole is chayav because of chayrish, which is plowing. So you're not allowed to take this thing and to drag it, which clearly sounds like the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. And then all of a sudden the Mishnah continues and says Rabbi Yehuda Omer, which the fact that now it says Rabbi Yehuda Omer, it sounds almost like the Reish is not Rabbi Yehuda. We're going to discuss that. Kol kalim inigrorim chutz min hagola minishahi koiveshas. He says any kli you're not allowed to drag because again it's going to make a chritz, excluding when it comes to this agola because it's koiveshas. So Rashi says chritz hanira behalucha lo ali chthirahu. It doesn't happen while it's being pulled that it's making this big indentation. Elam koiveshas bedoreses hakarka. It just presses down on the ground. That's all it does. Abel enu zaz afar mimkaima. It doesn't cause the earth to actually be moved. All it does is it presses it down, but it doesn't actually cause it to create a furrow, which is the issue of plowing. Okay, and therefore according to him, he says it's allowed. Alright, now let's see the Gemara. Aglasho katan tamei medrus. Why? The hasamachlai. Because a person does rest upon it. And therefore it's again not something a person can say, Amav Nasamachtenu. And the telos b'Shabbos, you can move it mishum the ikataris kliyalel, which is what Rashi said before as well. It's a kli, so it's not muksa. Then nigreres el al gabi kalim. So al gabi kalim in al gabi karka low. You cannot do it on the earth. My time to call abed charitz. Now, mani, that's clearly Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Devar Shen Meschav and Aser. The year of Shimon would allow it, as we saw already on Amud Aleph. The Amar Devar Shen Meschav is mutter. The Tanyas we learned. Rav Shimon Omer, Gur Adam Mita Kis V'Safsel, which is the quote of Rashi, which we saw already, that you can drag a bed, a chair, or a bench on the earth. Even if it does make a charitz, but since it was a Devar Shem didn't intend it, so it's allowed. So the question is, who is this like? It has to be like Rabbi Yehuda. So Ema Sefer, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ena Koyel Nigrorim B'Shabbos Chutz Min HaGolam Emnei Shehi Koiveshas, because it presses down. Emnei Shehi Koiveshas in. Aval charitz lo abda. You're not allowed to make into a charitz. So it's very clear. Again, it sounds it seems problematic. Says Rashi. So let's see the answer. Trei tanoi believe it or Yehuda. Look at Rashi. Koveshas in koveshas havi. Aval charitz lo abda. It doesn't make a charitz. So the Reishis seems like that this wagon or this baby carriage does make a charitz, and that's why you can't do it. And then the Sefer of Rabbi Yehuda talks about that it doesn't make a charitz. All it does is presses it down. So what does Rabbi Yehuda say? And again, it's trade to know Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rashi, Chad Savar Hagola Nami Kishar Kalim Dois L'Charitz. Some say that when you drag it, it makes an indentation like any other kli. Shapamim Shein Ha'oifen Misgalgel, because maybe the wheels will not rotate. It's going to drag, and it's going to end up causing like it to dig into the ground. It's going to move the earth. That's actually not something which is common, so therefore we're not concerned about that. So we completed the second parak. Let's see the Mishnah. In sudden dogim men habirin biyamtiv. Person's not allowed to trap fish, which comes from bibirin, which we're going to discuss exactly some type of area which holds fish. But the problem is that biyamtiv, since it's in the bibirin, since it's, according to this opinion, it's so big, you cannot trap it from it, which means it's not considered already trapped. If, let's say, you take a fish and you put it in this tiny little fish tank, so you caught it from the ocean, you put it there, so it lives, so that's okay, because you trapped it. It's now in this little fish tank. But this bibirin, is so big that you cannot trap it while it's in there on Yom Tov, because it's not considered to be trapped already. Now, the question is, why not? You're allowed to shecht on Yom Tov, so why aren't you able to trap on Yom Tov? So Rashi tells us, and this is question 5, very important question that Dirshu asks, Maishnat tzida meshchita dezu hutra b'Yom Tov, dezu lo hutra. So Rashi says, the first Rashi, Afagav de shchita v'afiya ubishul me'avos malachasein. Baking, cooking, slaughtering an animal, these are all av malachos. V'hutru with sarach Yom Tov, it's allowed for sarach Yom Tov, so taimu mishum di yeshem erev Yom Tov. To shchita chayish l'michmar bisra. We're concerned that if you do the shchita before and you just leave it around, what's going to happen? Pen yischamim v'yisrach. Maybe it's going to get hot and it's going to end up spoiling. So therefore, to have delicious fresh meat, the best thing you can do is to shecht it on Yom Tov itself. That's why it's mutter to do shchita and bishul and all these things on Yom Tov, because that is how the food will taste best as it's fresh. However, says Rashi, there's no reason why you couldn't have trapped it from before, and you put it in this like a fish tank, and just so it won't die. You can take it out of this tiny little fish tank, so just enough so it's in water, but it's already trapped. Now you can take it out, because on Yom Tov, if it's in this tiny little holder with water, this fish that you want to eat, you take it out. You're not now trapping it. It was already trapped. So therefore it's allowed. However, bibirin are so big that it's considered that it's not yet trapped, and therefore if you take it from that, that's considered to be tzad. That's trapping. That's why you're not to do it. Okay. You also cannot give it food, as we discussed before. The issue, like on Shabbos, or people do by Tashlach, they throw bread on Yom Tov to fish. The question is, that's not something which, they're not yours. It's not like the dog, in which we say, according to some shitas, lechem is allowed, is because it's not just for you, it's also your animals, according to one opinion, because you have a chiyuv to feed your animals. When it comes to wild animal, non-domesticated animals and birds, you could take them from bibirin, apparently because they're larger and therefore it's like it's already trapped. But and because they're yours, you could feed them. They're not all equal. And Zaklal kol hamachlusser, as we continue on Chaftal Madav, tzida, anything which is missing trapping, aser. V'shein hamachlusser tzida mutter. As long as it's not missing trapping, then it's allowed, because it's like already trapped. Okay, again, we're going to stop there. Let's see a couple of questions, and then we will stop. TA 28. Elu gimel malachos. These are the 3 malachos. Ika bebisrag muri, regarding the meat, which we said is allowed. So one is an issue of kiboy, mechave, extinguish. One's mavir, kindling, and also moyud reach. That you're creating this new smell. But again, we said it's mutter when it comes to bistra gimuri, and the question is, well, reach, it's a machlokas if that's acceptable as well. Fine, that was TA 28, TB 29. Mehem stadim. This is exactly the same question we had before. What are the 2 ways of looking? Im kirud ketan b'yos l'chabura shari b'yamtiv. Mehem stadim im kirtzuf gedon v'enos l'chabura shari. So whether or not you could use the kirud is whether, and it makes a chabura, it's you passing Rabbi Huda Rav Shimon, davishen b'scham is mutar aser. When the stadim, if kirtzuf is an issue, is whether your geyser the kirtzuf ought to kirud, because if you use the big one, you may end up eventually using the the small, and therefore some people will say it is Asr Adkan.